welcome to another Fast Tracks webinar. This is a weekly event we do every Friday at 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern, where we cover various topics of the Fast Track software. A list of these events can be seen on our website at goftx.com. Choosing the FTx Lifeline tab at the top of the page. Scroll down just a bit and look for the webinar button. Choose that, and this will show you a list of all of our upcoming webinars, all of our previously recorded webinars. You can view the recording by choosing that view recording button, as well as a link to sign up for upcoming newsletters to be notified of Fast Track's news and webinars. Today we're going to be going over a very important topic in regard to negative transactions. And this is something that every retailer out there should pay very close attention to when using the software, because this lets you keep an eye on all potential shrink. Now, a negative transaction, that's going to be what we call a void, a cancel sale, a return, or a no sale. Now, in our world, a void is going to be if you have an item on a transaction or multiple items on a transaction and you remove one or multiple of those items. You're voiding items off of that transaction. And then you continue with the sale and complete the sale. Due to items being removed, that's a void. We're going to log all the details that were involved in that transaction. A cancel sale is very similar to a void. There's going to be where instead of voiding a single or multiple items off of a transaction and completing it, you void the entire transaction. So that entire sale is canceled. No purchase is made. A return is going to be, of course, an item return, whether that be against a receipt or whether that be without a receipt. It's where one or multiple items in a transaction are going to be returned and cash or some kind of tender is given back to the customer, in-store credit, gift card, whatever the case may be. That is counted as a negative transaction as well. And then finally, the no sale, which is just simply incrementing the receipt number by one and popping the cash drawer open. All right, so if we go to director here, we first want to look at permissions. Permissions, of course, are one of the most important things across the system. So I'm going to go to my maintenance module here, and I'm going to go to my employees area, and I have a list of employees here, and I'm going to choose the cashier first. I'm going to choose that wrench to edit the user, and then I can see permissions here. Now, permissions can be pulled from a user group. If you want more detail on this, please watch the webinar on setting up user groups and tying user groups to employees. But in this case, I'm going to be doing just the employee itself. So whenever I do this, I want to pay attention to the cashier permissions area. And looking at these permissions here, we can see that there is a no sale permission, a cancel sale, a void, and an item return. Those are all going to be those negative actions. Those are very important to make sure that the appropriate personnel have permission to do that. The next thing we want to look at is the manager permission. Now, the manager permission, that's going to be used if you want to have a button tied to where only managers can use that button. And an example of that would be, of course, those negative transactions. So you can have those buttons behind a permission to where only a manager can actually utilize those. So I've got the cashier where they have permission to use these buttons, but they don't have the manager permission. So because of that, that means that only the manager personnel can actually use that. All right, so let's go log into the POS here. And we're going to log in as the cashier first. And we're going to see how that functionality looks whenever you're doing a negative transaction. So I'm going to log in here and notice I've got my buttons in place. There's an item return, a void, a cancel sale, and a no sale. So I'm going to simply ring up an item here. And then if I want to cancel the sale, then I just choose that cancel sale option and everything on that transaction is gone. So no matter what I actually have on this transaction, as I stated earlier, if I have multiple items on here, whenever I cancel that, I'm effectively removing every item on that transaction and it's incrementing to the next receipt number. No transaction is completed. Well, the void, I'm going to ring up some items here, will be removing one of those items. So if I go to my void, I can pick and choose what I want to remove. Notice there's that one item that was removed, and then I can complete the transaction. An item return, I first press that item return button. I then either scan the receipt barcode that has that transaction to this register that has the item, the price it was purchased for, etc., or I can manually return that item by UPC. I'll cash it out. Notice it's a negative value, so that means the customer's getting cash back. And then there's the no sale. And whenever I press that, it looks like nothing actually happens, but the cash door pops open and the receipt number is incremented by 1. So that's an example of all the negative transactions. Well, if I want to report on those, then that's where I do that via Director. So let's go to our reports module here. Let's go to the sales reports, and we're going to look for this negative cashier report. So here's where I would choose the store number. Here's where I want to choose either all cashiers or single cashiers. Here's where I can choose what item filter I want to look at, and then do I want to look at a date range or a register Z range? What receipts am I looking for? I'm just going to do the date range for today. Then I have the options of what I want to see. Voids, cancels, returns, and no sales. I want to see everything. So whenever I choose print and this report's generated, it's going to show me a list of every single negative transaction in that time frame. So I'm going to see all the items that were on that transaction, what type of negative it was, whether it be a cancel, return, or no sale. If there's any reasoning behind that, I'll see the cashier name. That's at the very beginning. And then I have the option of seeing what happened before and what happened after. So if I choose the show pre-post receipts, what it's going to do is show me the before transaction and after transactions. So if there's anything leading up to that potential shrink, I can see what leads up to it and what happens after it. So this is a great tool, a great report to just have set on a schedule, either adding it to favorites or actually scheduling it to run every day to see what's actually happening in the stores and what negative transactions are occurring. Because ideally, there should be no transactions that are negative. There should be, and if there is, there should be some reasoning why, some kind of notes why. Which brings us to some settings in the point of sale. Notice whenever I did these no sales and these negative transactions, nothing happened. It just immediately did the action. Well, there's some settings we can choose. Let me log into the manager that has permission to do this. By going to Actions, in Settings, we're going to look at some settings that are involving these negative transactions. So first and foremost, on the receipt that's printed out, whenever you do a negative transaction, you can have it either print those receipts or not print those receipts. There's options here to print the receipt up for a no sale, a cancel sale, and you can turn those on or off. Now, I'm going to leave those off right now. We're going to look at some more important settings here under the register settings. And that's going to be these prompt for notes on your no sale, cancel sale, and void. Now, ideally, these would be turned on because every time the cashier does a negative action, it would prompt for a reason why they're doing that negative action. So I'm going to toggle these on. And then as these are on, notice there's a little edit button. This is actually new to this update that was sent out this week. Before, if you had these turned on, the cashier could just type in whatever they wanted. They could type in the reason for that negative action. And the problem with that was it could be inconsistent. You could have one cashier that types one thing and another cashier that does the same action and types another thing. Well, this edit option here now lets you put in predetermined reasons. So I've got here customer cash back. For the no sale, I could put for cancel sale, decided against transaction. And essentially I can have up to 10 of these predetermined reasons. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to save these settings. I want those to prompt for notes. So I'm going to open my point of sale back up. And we're going to now do a no sell. And notice I now have a prompt. I can type a reason here and then okay that. And then that's my reason for that no sell. If I ring an item up and I want to use one of the predetermined reasons, I just simply tap on that drop down, choose the reason, and choose OK. And it's going to log that. So whenever I now look at that report and I look at these most recent transactions, notice the reason and notes field is now populated. So that's a very important thing to turn on to make sure that cashiers are putting reasoning, because if there is negative transactions in place at corporate, you would want to know why is there a negative transaction. So let's go back to the point of sale now, and let's see what happens if I, as the cashier, don't have the permission to see these buttons. Now notice there's here that I can obviously see those buttons. However, if the permission on that user is altered, let's go to our permissions here and let's say we're going to remove the void and the cancel sale and the no sale. So they have just item return. I'm going to save that. I'm now going to log back into the point of sale. I'm going to open it up and notice without the permission, those buttons that were previously there just are not there at all. I, as the cashier, don't even know they exist. The one button that still does exist, I have permission to use. If I log in as the manager, those buttons will indeed still be there. So that's what the permission does. It basically makes it to where even if the button's there, you can't see it to use it. So let's go one other direction. Let's give this cashier the permission back to see those. And let's look at what this manager permission does on the button. So I'm going to open the point of sale back up. And I'm going to log in as the manager because the manager has permission to edit panels. So I'm going to go to my actions and settings and the POS button editor. And I'm going to choose this panel to edit. If you have any questions or would like to know how to edit panels, there's a webinar that was done previously on editing panels and buttons. I would highly suggest you watch that. So on the void button, I'm going to highlight that. I'm going to edit that, and I'm going to choose Manager Override Required. And I'm going to do that for the cancel and no sale as well. I'm now going to save that panel. I'm going to go to my set. Log out of the manager and log back in as the cashier. So let's ring up an item here. And I'm going to try using that cancel sale button. But now, due to that checkbox being set to true on that cancel sale button, it now requires a manager login. So I, as the cashier, cannot proceed with canceling that sale unless there's a manager. And then the manager can either use their fingerprint for the biometric reader or simply punch in their employee number and password, and then you can do your reasoning and proceed with the transaction. So that's how the two permissions involved can change and alter the procedures of doing negative transactions. So finally, we're going to look at one other report. We just looked at the negative cashier report, how it shows all the negative transactions in there before and after. Well, if we want to just see a quick at-a-glance view of all negative transactions, we can do the negative item report. And there's a couple different reports in here. I can do the negative item summary report. What that will do is that will show me a list of the stores and then the total cancel, void, return, and no sell counts, and then the values, the total dollar values that are in those transactions. I can also do the negative items detail report. I can do a filter of specific items, but whenever I run this, it's going to show me every item that was involved in a negative transaction and show the type, the cashier name, the receipt, register number, time step, etc. Then there's the negative items worksheet, which works really, really well and very similar to the negative cashier report. Whenever you run this report, you can actually see pretty much the same report we had just looked at, but I can actually choose the view button on this, and it will essentially run the negative cashier report for that specific item. And then I can see all the transaction details, as in items that were on that transaction, but weren't negatively impacted, like a void. I can see the non-voided items. And then, of course, I can choose that show pre-post receipt and see the before and after. Then there's the item returns. Item returns is going to show just your item returns. Now notice on here, there's some red text. The red text is going to show up if the cashier altered, as in alter the return price or did a price override on the return to the system value. So we can see here that on this first transaction, the system price was $10.03 and the return price was $10.03. Well, below that, we can see the system price is still $10.03, but the return price is in red for $9. That means the cashier altered that return value, that return price of that item. So it quickly allows you to see what items were altered on that return. And then there's one report that filters that to where I can see just the items that have been returned that had the price altered. Okay, so that covers everything involving negative transactions. I hope everybody learned something new today. Once again, you can see a list of all of our webinars at our website, goftx.com. Choose the FTX Lifeline tab at the top of the page, and then scroll down for that webinar button. And that'll let you see a list of all of our upcoming webinars, our previous webinars, and as well as sign up for the newsletter to be notified of upcoming Fast Tracks news and other webinars. Thank you for your time. We hope you join for our webinar next week, and hope everyone during this COVID-19 pandemic stays well. Thank you.